Who are the most fearsome players in Premier League history? Here on Football Talks, we've compiled a list of the hardest men to ever play football in the Premier League. From fearsome finishers, rock-solid defenders, combative midfielders, these players struck fear in the heart of their opponents whenever they stepped foot on that pitch. This is the top 10 hardest men in Premier League history. First of all, let's define what we mean by hard in football. It's not just about the physical strength, it's about mental toughness, the willingness to play on the edge, to withstand the pressure of Premier League football. And all of these players have proven that they are capable of that. But at what personal cost to them and other players, you might say? Starting off our hardman list at number 10 is Zlatan Ibrahimovic. More known for his goal-scoring record and his prowess in front of goal. Don't let that kid you. The nasty streak follows Zlatan Ibrahimovic wherever he went, across every club across Europe. Knowing when to get away with tackles, making nasty tackles whenever the referee's back was turned. He clocked up some yellow cards and red cards. Interesting fact on Zlatan Ibrahimovic though was he never received a direct red card for violent conduct. It was always in retaliation and with 2 yellow cards. He was very, very smart and very crafty with how he operated on the pitch, Zlatan. Yes, the goals were there, but he knew how to get away with fouls on the pitch. He knew how to manipulate the referees, and the intimidation factor on Zlatan Ibrahimovic was right up there with the best of him. Number 9 on the list is Neil Ruddock. Playing in an era in the Premier League when tackles were celebrated as much as goals were, this was as tough a defender as you can get. He held one of the biggest records for yellow cards in Premier League history. In fact, at the time, his yellow card record of over 100 yellow cards was the record in the Premier League. He even joked one time that he had his own seat at the disciplinary board at the FA, the Football Association. Neil Ruddock was a man not to be messed with. He was a fierce character on and off the pitch. A bit of a joker, a bit of a Jack the lad. But when it came down to the serious matter of getting points on the board and helping his team along, Neil Ruddock played one way, and that was the hard way. Number 8 on the Football Talks hardman list is John Terry, a player that most fans probably wouldn't have thought would have been on this list. Yes, he was a fantastic captain, a brilliant leader, a brilliant footballer in fact, and was the captain for Jose Mourinho in Chelsea's most successful period in the club's history. But he was there for a reason. Jose knew what character John Terry was. He was a hard man at heart, hard and tough on the outside, and he had that mental strength to carry that Chelsea team forward. That Chelsea side was full of hard, determined players, and John Terry was the leader of the pack at the time. He knew how to tackle, he knew how to intimidate his opponents. John Terry also knowing when he needed to take one for the team. The ultimate leader on the pitch in the Premier League era. John Terry is right up there. The first player ever to be sent off in a Champions League final as well. Always sacrificing himself ahead of his team. This was a man that was right up there on the hard man list and in leadership qualities as well. In at number 7 for us is Nemanja Vidic, the giant Serbian centre-back for Manchester United. One fearsome, tough cooker. You could say that. This was a man of steel. This was a player who led by pure example, a captain of Manchester United as well. In an era when this team was full of leaders, Nemanja Vidic was an example to everybody on that pitch. One of the best tacklers, putting his body continuously on the line for Manchester United, defending on the floor, defending in any position possible. This guy had defending down to an art form, but he was rock solid. He knew what rivalries were like. He knew how big it was to be a player at Manchester United. In fact, getting 3 of his 11 red cards against Liverpool, Manchester United's greatest rivals. You can see why the fans loved this man. You can see why the fans took him to their hearts. He would wear his heart on his sleeve and give absolutely everything to the cause for Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson. An absolute legend of the football club, and definitely belongs in this top 10 list of hardest men in Premier League history. Have you ever known a player be sent off 3 times in one game? Well, at number 6, Joey Barton has done exactly that. Well, a 12-match ban, the biggest in Premier League history, was handed out to Joey Barton for an incident in the last game of the season between Queen's Park Rangers and Manchester City. It was a notorious game anyway, Manchester City clinching the title of Manchester United, but at the end of that game, Joey Barton not only elbowed Carlos Tevez, kneed Sergio Aguero, tried to headbutt Vincent Kompany, was given a 12-game ban, the biggest in Premier League history, for 1 minute of madness on the pitch. It didn't stop there with Joey Barton. He carried out his whole career playing exactly the same way, that aggressive nature from midfield. Joey Barton could play football, But all anybody is going to know Joey Barton for is his hard man mentality on the pitch. 100% committed to everything, but did cross the line quite a few times, Joey Barton. He makes it in at our number 6. It has been very difficult ranking this hardest men in Premier League history, but we finally have got down to a top 5. Do you agree with our 10 to 6? Get in the comments below, everybody. Who do you think is coming up next making this top 5 up? Number 5 is Vinnie Jones, one of the most notoriously hated and intimidating figures in world football, not just Premier League football. No more these days for his acting skills rather than what he accomplished on the pitch, but back in the early 90s in the Premier League era, Vinnie Jones was a feared man, and his Wimbledon Crazy Gang was one of the most fearsome teams to walk out on a Premier League pitch. Vinnie Jones himself held fear factor within his own team that if they didn't go out and do their duties on the pitch, they'd be scared about what he might do to them off the pitch. A hard tackling, hard nut, got away with so much and knew how to get away with so much, intimidating referees to the point where he was pretty much running the game and getting in referees' faces and manipulating the game from that point of view as well. Vinnie Jones also holds the record for the fastest yellow card in English football history, just 3 seconds. And that coming in an era when it was harder to get yellow and red cards as well, and you could get away with a lot more. 3 seconds, let that sink in. Vinnie Jones 100% belongs in that top 5 of our hardest men in Premier League history. Jaap Stam is at number 4. Now everybody knows who Jaap Stam is. That no-nonsense, don't mess with me centre-back that Sir Alex Ferguson brought in from Lazio to add that grit, steel and determination to his side in the late 90s. Jaap Stam's record, when you look at yellow cards and red cards, don't stand up to many other players in this list. In fact, Jaap Stam never received a straight red card in his whole football career. He didn't even receive a red card in his time at Manchester United. So he stands on this list alone for the sheer intimidation factor. A feared man, always stood up for his teammates, always up for a fight, never shirked to tackle, full-blooded in every single challenge that he made on that pitch. A leader, a monster, a character, and just a look at Jaap Stam, he looks scary and definitely belongs on our list of hardest men in Premier League history, and 100% deserves to be in this top 5. There are players on this list for their leadership qualities, players on this list simply because they are rock solid, defensively superb, mentally strong and tough and willing to take it right to the edge. And then there are players on this list, like our number 3, like Duncan Ferguson, who are just out and out scary. Duncan Ferguson, one of the most feared players in Premier League history. Everybody will tell you the same story about Duncan Ferguson, the only man in British football history to be arrested for an act of violence on a football pitch. This guy went into tackles like he was ready to kill people. Studs up, elbows, headbutts, you name it. Duncan Ferguson has been sent off for every single misdemeanor that could possibly be put up there. Duncan Ferguson and his disciplinary record is out there with the worst that there is in British football history. And he is in at number 3 simply because he is just out and out scary. You went head to head with Duncan Ferguson, you better be prepared to protect yourself, because he didn't care if he was on the football pitch and national TV was watching him. He would do anything. Like we said, forearms, elbows, everything possible Duncan Ferguson could do to hurt a player he has done on the football pitch. He more than belongs in at number 3 just through sheer fear factor alone. I think it's quite fitting that our Football Talks hardest men in Premier League history top 2 is one of the biggest and most notorious rivalries that we've ever had in the Premier League. In at number 2 of our list is Patrick Vieira, the leader, the legend of that invincible Arsene Wenger side that won as much as they possibly could. Absolutely brilliant football side, but they carried a toughness in that as well. And the leader of that team was Patrick Vieira. 6'4", intimidating figure, sent off 10 times in the Premier League. That is up there with one of the biggest disciplinary records in Premier League history. 8 of them red cards came in an Arsenal shirt. That was a club record at the time also. He knew how to get a red card. He knew how to get a yellow card, Patrick Vieira. He knew how to lead his team also. And this is why we've got players like Patrick Vieira right at the top of this list. It isn't always just about that intimidation factor and how hard he was and how many red cards he got. It's about them leadership qualities and how good the player was with it. Combining that all together makes the hardest player on our list, and Patrick Vieira more than belongs in this top 10. A fantastic player, fantastic goal scorer, fantastic captain and leader for Arsene Wenger, but one of the toughest tackling, hardest men in Premier League history without a shadow of a doubt. And in at number 1, of course it has to be Roy Keane. That rivalry with Patrick Vieira was notorious for everybody who watched the Premier League in the early days. Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Arsenal, Manchester United, challenging for all of the top honours at that time, and both Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira were at the forefront of carrying their teams forward, both with amazing leadership qualities, but Roy Keane edges this one. He just about edges it because Manchester United were more successful. But don't take away from Roy Keane's character, his hard man mentality and what he did in his career. Roy Keane was one of the toughest players to ever step foot on that pitch. And there has been some mega names on this list, as you have already seen. But Roy Keane took it to that next level when it came to leadership and carrying his team over the line, sacrificing himself in that semi-final in Turin against Juventus, getting United to the final against Bayern Munich. This was what Roy Keane does, scoring that goal, having been suspended earlier on in the game with a yellow card. This is what Roy Keane was all about. He didn't care about what was to come. It was all about the now. But Roy Keane had that nasty streak, and it was seen throughout his time in the Premier League, especially at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. So many red cards, so many yellow cards. Roy Keane with the biggest fine in Premier League history, £150,000 fine Roy Keane got for owning up in an autobiography a year after an incident where he deliberately went out to injure a player in Alfie Haaland. Alfie Haaland notoriously laughing at Roy Keane while he was supposedly faking an injury at Ellen Road while the player was playing for Leeds. Roy Keane set out his stall and went back for revenge against Alfie Haaland. One of the most notorious stories in Premier League history, one of the most controversial as well. For a player to be fined and banned a year after an incident, Roy Keane did it all. He won absolutely everything. Roy Keane was and is always going to be the hardest man in Premier League history. Do you agree with our list, our top 10 of the hardest men in Premier League history? Please do comment below. Let us know if we missed out on any player that you thought should have been in that top 10. Give the video a like, and if you're loving the content, make sure you have subscribed as well, and we'll see you in the next one.